Through Time into Healing is Dr. Brian Weiss's second book. It follows his first book, Many Lives, Many Masters, that details his own personal revelation of discovering past life regression while he was trying to practice hypnotherapy with a client after he had already done 18 months of psychotherapy that had not shown the usual and expected improvements. And that book covers just the one case study of that patient who had come to him as a psychiatrist, so it was a surprise to both of them when past lives spontaneously came up. Through Time into Healing sees Weiss now settle into the business of helping a variety of people with a variety of issues, and now intentionally using past life regression to do that. So this book has less of the wow factor of the initial discovery and less of the interweaving of Brian Weiss's own personal story. Hi, I'm Mark Beale. I'm a past life regression therapist, a hypnotherapist, and a certification trainer. And I'm the author of the book, Past Life Awakening, 7 Regression Case Studies Illustrate 7 Spiritual Laws, which you can get as a paperback, ebook, or Kindle from bookstores. Check the links in the description. In Weiss's words, he gives us an update on what's happened since his first book as he says, quote, "After my experience with Catherine, my perspective on psychotherapy began to change rapidly. I realized that past life therapy offered a rapid, direct way to heal pain and fear. I began to use this therapy on other patients and again had excellent results." End quote. In his first book, he mentioned working with 12 other clients in past lives. Now, 4 years later, he says, quote, "At the time of this writing, I have regressed hundreds of patients to past lives during their individual therapy sessions. I have regressed many times that number in group workshops. They are people from different religions, socioeconomic levels, educational backgrounds, and belief systems, yet many of them have been able to remember details from other lives, and many of them have been able to remember survival after physical death." End quote. So we left off with Catherine and learning that past life regression can happen and did work for this one client to help where psychotherapy should have helped, but strangely didn't. And note that book was Many Lives, Many Masters. It was not many clients. It was only one client. Now Weiss has continued to explore, this time with many clients. He says about the hundreds he's now worked with, quote, "Many were able to rid themselves of chronic lifelong symptoms, such as specific phobias, panic attacks, recurrent nightmares, unexplained fears, obesity, repeated destructive relationships, physical pain and illness. They remember names, dates, geography, details. Perhaps even more important than the curing of specific physical and emotional symptoms is the knowledge that we do not die when our bodies do." End quote. So now we pick up where Brian is over the wow factor of it can happen, and we get into how that actually heals. But it is just as fascinating and even more educational for people who are interested in studying this modality and curious to get more of an education on how past life regression works. And for people interested in receiving sessions, they're more likely to find a case study that they can personally relate to. So then they understand what past life regression can do and feel inspired to have their own sessions. Or in reviewing these multiple client types and issue types, other healers can be reminded of clients and issues that they have, and so think, well, perhaps past life regression could be a modality that can be helpful for them too. So that then inspires them to read further and perhaps go on to get certification training so they can put it into practice themselves and elicit from their clients the kind of case studies that we read about in these books. So while Weiss does emphasize the wisdom of the subconscious mind to elicit an inner wisdom from the client through hypnosis, he is now careful not to let people over-assume that the magic of hypnosis or an otherworldly wisdom can take over. He spells this out by saying, quote, "Regression therapy consists of much more than hypnotic technique. Before the hypnotic process can be initiated, a skilled regression therapist will spend a great deal of time taking a history, asking questions, getting answers, and going very specifically and in great detail into particular areas of importance. And after the regression is completed, after the patient has emerged from the hypnotic state, it is then necessary to integrate the feelings, insights, and the information the session has elicited into the current life situation. End quote. So past life regression really is not a standalone modality, and is not one where the subconscious mind or even the superconscious mind can replace the therapist. They cannot even put the therapist in the back seat. It is the therapist's job to do substantial work to engage those abilities, not to defer to them. Now, it might even seem like that at times with some clients, but for consistent professional level outcomes with all types of clients, therapists need the skills to drive home the change, even as we go through time into healing. So Weiss sees regression as being, quote, very similar to the concept of neurosis and repetition compulsion that Freud hypothesized, which is that apparently hidden traumas in the past result in present symptoms, and they must be uncovered to relieve those symptoms. My only disagreement with traditional analysis is that it needs to be extended backwards beyond this lifetime to reach the root of some problems. End quote. So we've talked about the past. Now we get to the specifics of into healing. And it's important to define exactly what we mean by healing. Weiss does this by grouping case studies into other sections. So by the chapter titles, we can see that healing can come in the form of healing troubled relationships, healing the inner child and the abused child, healing the need to protect, uncovering the sources of obesity and substance abuse, healing the grieving. But the very first chapter about healing and the first group of case studies it's contained is called Healing the Body by Healing the Mind. So Weiss describes a psychologist who presents the issue of intermittent, excruciating pains in her neck, shoulders, and upper back, and a phobia of heights. In hypnosis, Weiss attempts to regress her to a past life, but she says all she sees as darkness. Now, many novice regressionists here may lose confidence and feel it's not working and give up. But you can stick with it by doing things like asking if they can turn on a light, move to a lightened place, see yourself from a distance, or understand why there's darkness. In this case, Brian probes and realizes it's dark because she's blindfolded in her past life. Now, some other novice or less experienced clients might have worried that I can't visualize, which is often an exaggerated or limiting belief. 20/20 visuals are not required, but pretty much everybody can have enough of a visual sense to know what's going on and at least get the big picture. So here, this is what she does. As she gets past the blindfold, she says, quote, I saw myself from the outside. I was standing on top of a castle tower made of stone. My hands were tied behind my back. I was in my early 20s, and I knew that I was a soldier on the side that had lost the battle. Then I felt an excruciating pain in my back. I was being lanced. I could feel the lance in my back. Then I felt myself falling, and I felt the water of the moat closing around me. I've always been terrified of heights and drowning. End quote. After her session, she reported, quote, next morning, when I woke up, I thought, something's different. Something's very different. What was different was that Elaine's back pain and her fear of heights had disappeared. Unquote. Now, with phobias in this life, in hypnotherapy, we do something we call regress to the past and fix it. The only difference between healing a phobia with hypnotherapy to this life and healing it in a past life is that they have to go through a bit more time into healing. Neck pain remained, so she returned for another session, and Weiss writes, quote, Elaine vividly re-experienced a lifetime in medieval France as an impoverished, dispirited, and hopeless male in his 20s. This man lacked the courage to be different, to speak out, to emerge from his rut and change his lot in life. The authorities wrongly accused Elaine, or the boy that she was, of a crime he did not commit, so Elaine was arrested and hanged in public. After this session, her chronic neck pain disappeared. So did something else. Elaine was able to pinpoint a new area for emotional growth in the present. She saw that her experiences then had influenced her current reluctance to speak out and to take risks. Elaine decided to take the plunge. She risked her professional reputation by telling news reporters and other therapists about her remarkable experiences in her past lives. And this time, instead of being hanged in public, she was congratulated. End quote. This case study shows how people often present their issue as physical, like their back or neck pain, but dig a little deeper and we find that it's emotional. There's a fear. Keep digging. And the real ultimate issue is a mental limiting belief that blocks them from fulfilling their life purpose. So at a higher level, the past life regression sessions here weren't about physical back pain. They were more about what was spiritually holding her back. We can certainly go through the physical symptoms, but we have to get to the underlying causes. And these need to be in the subconscious mind, not only in the physical body. As Weiss says, quote, past life regression under hypnosis can be part of the amelioration and even the cure of certain chronic symptoms and illnesses, especially those that may have a psychosomatic component, end quote. These healing the body case studies can be misinterpreted as healing primarily the body, so it's vital that Weiss did not omit the details about her phobias and what had been spiritually holding her back. So this really was a psychosomatic case, not a physiological case. Physiological cases are for physicians and medical doctors. Psychosomatic or subconscious related cases only may be applicable for hypnotherapy and past life regression, because past life regression has an emphasis and order of priorities, which is first healing the soul, the sub and superconscious mind, then the heart, then the mind and its limiting beliefs, and only then, lastly, and maybe, all of that healing may then have a positive and essentially side effect on the physical body. So Weiss continues with examples in this book, including a pilot who had anger issues and an anxiety combined with a compulsion to excessively check his right wing before takeoff, and he had issues with arthritic knees. Now, in Regression, he found himself as a young German pilot in World War II whose right wing was shot off by friendly fire. And as he died, he was furious at the error made by others and that he was being separated from his young family by his untimely death. In another session, they recalled another past life where he suffered severe knee injuries that became infected, leaving him crippled and angry for the rest of his life with his helpless knees. Regressing to these causes helped him release anger and release the anxiety of flying. And so then, that emotional, mental, and spiritual release of coming to peace with his past finally flowed through to relieve the pain in his physical body, in his knees in this life. The simple existence of a mind-body connection does not make the subconscious mind the complete solution for all physical issues. With that said, it's certainly not uncommon as a consequence, and Weiss goes on to document a number of other cases with physical aspects. But note, even in this book specifically about healing, this chapter about physical healing is the first one, but a smaller one. It's certainly a small subset of any past life regression healing work we do. Now, for the rest of the book, Weiss looks at what are the more common core issues of the head, heart, and soul. And he does that by giving chapters with a series of many short case studies, often just one page or a few pages. So this time we don't get to settle into the characters or context, but we do get a good overview of many general principles and patterns that can occur as a past life therapist works with many clients on many issues. Which brings us to the chapter Healing Troubled Relationships. Weiss tells of a romantic couple who've had repeating patterns where she provocatively flirts with others and he has violent and jealous anger. That's the pattern in this life, and they find that that has repeated over many lifetimes, and it sometimes ended in murder, like the stabbing with a long dagger in 8th century Arabia. So Brian Weiss notes, quote, past physical trauma seems to leave present physical residue, unquote. Well, the same applies for emotional trauma. So we can notice there's no mention of present life physical symptoms being due to being stabbed by a dagger in the past life. So there is no physical healing to be done here, even though physical harm was caused in the past. But there are residues of heartbreak and the proverbial knife to the heart from excessive emotional reactions. So this healing was not physical, like the knees or the lance through the back, but it was a healing of emotions that had brought them to the knees, and the dagger of heartbreak that once healed allowed forgiveness and healthy love. As Weiss says, quote, "Some of our more difficult and challenging life experiences occur in the context of relationship and families. We live in our bodies, and we express ourselves through our relationships. It is our primary method of learning and evolving." End quote. Now, troubled relationships is often taken as romantic relationships, but here Weiss specifies relationship and families. Now, people often think their soulmate is their romantic soulmate, and that in their past lives they've been repeating patterns where in other lives they were also in a romantic relationship, even as the same genders, playing out similar behaviors in this life. But the reality that we see in the context of past lives is that much more often, over many lives, genders are swapped, roles are swapped. They're often not in a romantic marriage type relationship, but they're playing even different family or social roles. And our soulmates can be people that we fall in love with romantically, but that they can also be people we have an instant dislike to, like family members who carry over residual emotions from when they were betrayed as a past life lover, business partner, or an unrelated enemy. And relationships can form when we have an instant friendship. And in my own practice, I had a young guy who was unaccountably devoted to his elder, unrelated male friend. And he came to me for hypnotherapy because he was oddly distraught with worry about the health issues of his elder good friend, who he treasured dearly and feared his death. Now, we found a number of past lives where they had been family together, actual father and son, and where the young man had been a devoted wife to his friend who was then his husband. So finding those past lives explained this mysterious friendship and justified their bond, and it also assured him that even if his poor health would separate them, that their bond transcends time and this physical form. So the answer to healing isn't always a physical healing that means we never die. It's healing the fear of leaving the physical body. Now, this romantic idea of a soulmate is one that the young unmarried tend to have, but we observe as people get older and have children, they may drift away from the romantic partner, but drift into a great and deep, strong bond with a particular child that takes over and dominates much more than the romantic partner. So it may be that that one that has come through as a child has a deep karmic connection with that person and may well have been not just a daughter, but a mother, a grandmother, a benefactor, a lover, a dear friend in many other lives. And the initial romanticism of youth gives way to the perception of another form of love. As Weiss says, quote, "A soulmate is often someone with whom we met and feel an instant connection, as though we've known that person for a long time. In fact, we probably have. We do not have to be romantically involved with a person to experience the satisfaction and fulfillment of the soulmate connection." End quote. So past life regression helps us go beyond ideas like blood is thicker than water into a more transcendent view that helps us see everyone as family spiritually, as they are all members of our soul group. So past life regression helps us go beyond a romanticized version of soulmates into a more transcendent view that helps us then see beyond gender identity, to see everyone as reincarnating souls going through this method of learning and evolving. The next chapter is healing the inner child and the abused child. Weiss notes this is an area covered by many therapeutic techniques, and it's certainly a cornerstone of hypnotherapy that regresses to this life. Weiss says, quote, "When childhood pain has not been resolved and emerges in the adult, it can produce a whole host of symptoms, including guilt, shame, depression, low self-esteem, and self-destructive behaviors." End quote. Common examples of this that I see are people feeling that I am not enough or I don't deserve love, and that leads them to repeating and creating painful circumstances as adults that leads them into troubled relationships. The antidote they look for is to be able to create healthy boundaries and take self-leadership to be free. So this aspect of going through time into healing the inner child in this life is very well understood in conventional psychology. Yet the process of healing a cause from 30 years ago versus 300 years ago is really much the same. The only real difference is the quantity of time. Now, if we decide we're a past life regressionist and only regress to past lives, we will find that regardless, people will regress to whatever pain point is relevant, and that will often be a pain point as a child in this life. So hypnotherapy is common in past life regression. As Weiss says himself here, quote, "Inner child work and the ensuing catharsis act as a doorway to past life therapy. Traumas experienced in this lifetime's childhood are sometimes variations on traumas experienced in other lifetimes. These prior lifetimes may be the true source of this childhood's pain. Re-experiencing the source of the problem can heal the current lifetime's inner child." End quote. In my own book, Past Life Awakening, 7 Regression Case Studies Illustrate 7 Spiritual Laws, I illustrate this to be the case in every single one of my 7 in-depth case studies. Every one includes the context of the hypnotherapy that is implicit in all complex past life regression done at a high level. Now, I won't spoil Brian's book by recounting too many more specific examples, but I will point to the principles. So a principle to observe is that while many past life regression clients will also bring up this life events of a hurt inner child or an abused child, they only do that when it is very specifically relevant to their issue. Now, Weiss cites these statistics in the book about the number of people in the US who suffer as childhood victims of sexual abuse. He says that's 33% in women and 20% in men. So if you're a therapist working with people, many of them will have these childhood issues, but they often will not come up in your regression because they're not needed to resolve their primary issue. So just because hypnotherapy can be part of past life regression, it doesn't insist on digging up every issue that ever happened in childhood. And the subconscious won't bring it up unless it's absolutely necessary. So good therapists may have many tools that they can use to get the job done that best serves the intentions and mandate given by the client. And it's really a poor therapist that has a favorite or singular tool like a hammer, so they just go around looking for a nail to hit with it, whether the client wants or needs it. This is another reason not to offer past life regression exclusively, and to be prepared in case inner child healing or early in this life trauma needs some healing along the way. Now, it also works the other way. If you're only offering this life healing, you may be missing out on a tool that can benefit many people. As Weiss says, quote, "Past life therapy can be important to the healing process because, for many adult survivors, it provides a rapid, safe way of unlocking and clearing the experience, and because it also offers a larger emotional and spiritual framework in which to process and integrate the memories and feelings that are released during the healing process. Past life therapy gives victims new handles and hooks for approaching and grasping their experiences." End quote. This is an important message because just as a lot of my hypnotherapy students or clients start by thinking that hypnotherapy is only for smoking, weight, or phobias, but then they discover it's actually most used for trauma or inner emotional work. Similarly, my past life regression students or clients start off thinking past life regression is just to find out who I was in a past life or clear some karma, without them even being clear on what exactly that means. But they then discover it's mostly also about working through inner emotional and mental work. so they can be more clear and free in this life, in this present moment. So it really is emotions, relationships, past traumas, and limiting beliefs that make up by far the majority of hypnotherapy and what I call general hypnotherapy that then leads into past life regression. But there still are specialist issues with which hypnotherapy does work, like weight loss, smoking, phobias, addictions, or perhaps better, habitual repetitive behaviors. So Weiss himself acknowledges this and how that can connect into past lives. So now we can move on from general issues to specialist issues, because Weiss has a whole chapter called Healing the Need to Protect, uncovering the sources of obesity and substance abuse. Now, if this doesn't sound particularly spiritual, that's an illusion. These apparently conventional issues that are also addressed in hypnotherapy are also deeply spiritual and have root causes that can often reach back to past lives. So I have videos on this channel, either on or upcoming, about weight control, stopping smoking, and alcohol reduction as a hypnotherapist. But as I release this video now, those are upcoming videos. So I will release an entire video detailing Weiss's approach to the sources of obesity and substance abuse, so you can reference that with what I will have then said about hypnotherapy. So stay tuned, stay subscribed to the channel, and we can speak more about it coming up. So there are actually a couple of other areas of this book that I will go into that also deserve their own video and review, so I will go into them as well. So we're getting there enough for this review of this book. So to wrap it up now, let's look at how Weiss wraps up this book, which is Appendix A, is called Making Your Own Relaxation and Regression Tape, so that you can have your own taste of hypnosis and past life regression. Now, I do the same thing at the end of my book and provide a script. In addition to this, anytime you find a book that has a script in it, what you want to do is take the action of recording that yourself. Now, the percentage of people who actually get around to doing this will be pretty low. Therefore, I also provide myself a number of already recorded 1-hour past life regression sessions on my YouTube channel and podcast, both called the Past Life Awakening Institute. So look for the links in the description to those and click through for your own experience. I also offer inexpensive courses that offer hours of video preparation, including intake written exercises that replicate the intake process that a good therapist will do, and then prepares you for not just an hour-long one-off, but a systemic program of 3 1-hour audio sessions that will cover some regression to this life and past lives. And I do that in 2 courses. One is Past Life for Healers, and the second is Past Lives for Soulmates and Relationships. Both of those courses are available on my website. Now, lastly, for Weiss's book, there is an afterword, as the Appendix B has a suggested reading list. This list contains over 70 books, and it's another way of saying, despite the critics, there are dozens of writers who affirm my work. And this list also affirms the importance of reading. That is why I'm making this video series, based on my own suggested reading list of 25 books, a few of which are also on Brian Weiss's list. So we both affirm the idea that anyone interested in practicing past life regression should be well read in this subject. Now, it's interesting to note Weiss's list includes related works of fiction like Richard Bach and writers on psychic experiences, channeling, and near-death experiences, yet it does mostly include very scientifically and specifically past life regression books by researchers and psychology practitioners like Dr. Ian Stevenson, Dr. Roger Woolger, and Dr. Edith Fiore. And it's books by each of these 3 people that I will cover in my upcoming video and podcast Past Life Regression book reviews. So stay tuned, follow the podcast, subscribe to the YouTube channel for them as they come out, and thank you for listening. To get my book, Past Life Awakening, 7 Regression Case Studies Illustrate 7 Spiritual Laws, which you can get as a paperback, ebook, or Kindle from bookstores, check the links in the description. To have hypnotherapy or past life regression sessions with me, click the link below. To get training with me that includes video courses, technical manuals, session swaps with fellow students, and can include personal mentoring with me, Click the links to learn hypnotherapy with my Hypnotherapy Specialist Institute or Past Life Regression, Spirit Release Between Lives with my Past Life Awakening Institute.